Hey, I'm Srini, host and founder of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast and the creator of Maximize Your Output with Mem. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a editorial calendar in Mem for your blog, podcast, or newsletter. And if you want to learn how to take smart notes that you can actually use to create content for that editorial calendar, whether it's a blog or newsletter, then be sure to check out our free course on how to take smart notes. I'll include a link in the description below. Now, let's get to the video. There are 4 steps to creating an editorial calendar for your blog, newsletter, or podcast in Mem. This is pretty straightforward. I did a first video about this, but I realized that I didn't know much about Mem at the time, and I want to do an updated version of this to show you how this workflow has evolved since I have used Mem for about a year or 18 months now. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is to create a mem for your blog or newsletter. So you can see here, if we click here, I have a mem for the Unmistakable Creative blog. In this case, I've combined the Unmistakable Creative blog and the Unmistakable Creative newsletter. But if you look here, I have the Maximize Your Output newsletter. And what we're doing right now is we're actually turning all these videos into blog posts. So I'm sending those out to the Maximize Your Output newsletter, where you can read blog post versions of these video tutorials with a embedded version of the video at the end. So those are 2 things that you need to do. The first step is to create the mems for your newsletter or your blog. The next step is really where a lot of the work happens, and that is capturing ideas. And my attitude towards this is that you should just capture ideas as they occur to you. Because a lot of times what ends up happening with our ideas is they either sound stupid when we have them and they turn out to be brilliant, or they sound brilliant when we have them and they turn out to be really stupid. And so there are a couple of different ways that you can capture ideas. The first is by adding bidirectional links to your notes. So if we go and do a quick search for blog post idea here, I'm going to bring up the Unmistakable Creative blog and newsletter. One of the things you'll see if you go through my blog post ideas is that a lot of these are often based on something that I've linked to something else, or while I was writing a note, an idea just occurred to me and I created a bidirectional link based on that note. So for example, if you look here, you will see that it's mentioned in another note that I was taking on a book. And this ended up being an idea for a blog post that I wanted to write about, where I just wrote this as the first line, but you can see that this is empty, even though this is based on a book note. So that's one thing you want to do when you're taking notes on books, or you're taking smart notes, and you have an idea that could be a standalone idea as a permanent note or a potential blog post. Don't worry if you have no idea what's going to go into this note, just capture it, because you can always find it later. And because of the fact you tagged it, it's a blog post idea. And we'll talk here in just a second about how to tag. So let's go back to the steps in the tutorial and come back here. So that's the first way that you can do this. The other, of course, is to just call up Mem Spotlight. And one of the things I like about Mem Spotlight is that it doesn't matter if you're in Mem or not. As long as Mem is open, you can capture any idea as it occurs to you. For example, I could say, here's a guide to staying motivated to accomplish your goals for the new year. And then what I would do, this part is really important, is how you tag it. So I'll tag it as UC blog, which is the first tag, which is the overarching context tag, and then I'll give it a status tag. And we'll get here into a second in terms of what to do with statuses. The other option, do a cut here. The other option is to just create a new mem by pressing Command N and capturing your idea. But the key to organizing this is having your tagging set up properly. One of the things that people do wrong when it comes to tagging of any kind in Mem or any other knowledge management system is that they use way too many tags, and as a result, their tags end up being kind of useless. So I like to abide by what I call a 2-tag rule, which is one overarching context tag and then a second tag. So for example, in the case of the blog or newsletter, as you saw, we have a couple of different tags here. So I have blog post idea, work in progress, published, or ready for proofread. And if I click on blog post idea, you can see here that I know where all of these different ideas are, even though most of them have nothing in them. So you never end up having a shortage of ideas. I also have work in progress tags for things that are done but not entirely done. Do another cut here. I also have work in progress tags for blog posts that I started working on, but I didn't actually finish. And that way you don't lose those ideas. They don't go to waste just because you haven't finished working on them. And then finally, I have the published and ready for proofread tags. So tagging is a really big part of how you manage an editorial calendar in Mem, especially when you're capturing ideas, because often what you'll see in a typical editorial calendar is what you see here below, where you have all these categories and ideas, and that just becomes a giant mess to manage, especially when you want to capture ideas quickly. So this final step, which is to add the links to the mems for your blog or newsletter is optional. And I tend to only add links to this blog or newsletter mem when I feel that I'm almost halfway done with a blog post and I know that I'm going to be in a position to publish it. So what I typically will do is I will actually set this up based on months. So that way I have an idea for one blog post every week. And not all of these get published. Sometimes I come up with no ideas that I end up publishing. But knowing that I have some semblance of a plan allows me to stay consistent with my content production process. So you can see here that I already have a December plan for blog posts. And if I go here to mem.ai newsletters, you can see I have November all planned out here, and I will add December to it at the end of the day. So that's the basic overview of how to create a editorial calendar in Mem. So let's just go back and review the steps. Step one, create a mem for your blog or newsletter. Then capture ideas as they occur to you using bidirectional links from your notes, mem spotlight, or just creating new mems. Step three is to tag those ideas by context and then status. So in this case, the context tags are blog, newsletter, or podcast, and the status tags are idea, in progress, revisions, ready for proofread, or published. And then the last step, which is optional. And as I said, I don't do this when I capture ideas. I only do this when something is a work in progress that's close to being finished and ready to be proofread. And then you go ahead and then you just add it to your mem for your unmistakable creative. The fourth step, which is optional, is to add the links for your ideas to your blog or newsletter mem. Now, as I said, don't tend to do this until I feel like something is close enough to the finish line that I can call it a work in progress or it's going to be ready to be proofread, because otherwise you just end up cluttering this page with a bunch of irrelevant stuff that isn't really ready yet. But the upside of running your editorial calendar this way is that one, you'll never have a shortage of ideas, and two, it allows you to stay consistent with your content production. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below.